Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 39 of Fracking Nightmare. And what a week it's been. A week of mixed emotion. Well, before we get on to the events of the week and the coming weeks, let's start the show in what has become a bit of a traditional way here, which is to reflect on the iGas share price. And iGas, I can promise you that if the shares start moving in the other direction, I'll report that as well, all in the interests of balance. Meanwhile, of course, this is the iGas logo. And as you can see, the iGas graphic designers still haven't acknowledged the fact that the ballot for Scottish independence actually went in the favour of Westminster and the Crown. But they're still showing on their artwork here, on their logo, a separation of Scotland. But nonetheless, the stock price continues its journey south. So here we can see this rather disturbing, if you're an investor, slide here, right from the peak of 160. That's 160 pence, that is, of course. At the beginning of the year, and it's pretty much now almost down to half that. So, of course, those people who bought here and sold here made out like bandits, but pretty much anybody buying after mid-January has pretty much seen it head south. Let's have a look over the last week. Not a pretty picture if you're an investor, but an absolutely stunning landscape for those of us who have some pretty serious concerns about the unconventional gas industry. And certainly our counsel is that unless you've got shed loads of money, which you're prepared to lose in a Ponzi scheme, then get the hell out now. So this is what it's done today. It's traditional Monday morning jump. A few pennies there, but closing the day just a little over 82 pence. Well, it didn't go the gas industry's way, but there again, it didn't necessarily go the anti-fracking community's way entirely. But it's a long game. It's a very long game indeed. But let's have a look at some of the events that have occurred since we were last on air last week. And in Ireland, over the last few weeks, we've been reporting about the unfolding situation in this quarry near the community of Belcoo in County Fermanagh, and the fact that some 700 people turned up at the entrance of the site there to blockade it. And on the weekend, there were some 140 farm vehicles in a rally, letting the Irish Assembly know in no uncertain terms that the local community did not in any way, shape or form support Tamron's licence. Well, Matthew Durkin, the Environment Minister in Northern Ireland, announced that basically he was effectively going to demand an environmental impact analysis from Tamron. Well, it seems that the Northern Irish Assembly went one stage further, because here is the opening paragraph from that article. The licence granted to a company that plans to drill for shale gas in County Fermanagh has been terminated. Music to the ears of everybody in County Fermanagh, that's for sure. Tamron was granted a petroleum licence in 2011. It had 3 years to inform the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Investment on its decision to drill or drop their plans. Enterprise Minister Arlene Foster said the licence had been terminated as the deadline had passed. The company said it is seeking a judicial review of that decision. Tamron had planned to extract gas using the controversial fracking technique. Well, the judicial review, would certainly seem to be a process that is going to be used quite extensively as this industry attempts to get its bits in the ground. But the rising awareness amongst local communities who are determined to ensure that doesn't happen, which, as I was discussing earlier this evening, is one of the reasons that David Cameron is determined to remove from the statute books what he keeps referring to as the hated Human Rights Act. Well, this is hated by government, hated by the global corporatists, because it provides a vehicle by which the anti-fracking community, and in fact anybody who has the audacity to challenge the establishment's view of things, it works in their favour. It upholds the fundamental right to assembly and the fundamental right to protest. Now, why is it that this is the fastest growing social movement in the UK? Well, that is because people in the UK are doing their research. They are looking at the effects that this industry is having wherever it has become established in the US, in Canada, or in Australia. Well, I want you to take a look at this short video. This is actually almost a year old now, this video, from Queensland in Australia. And the people of Queensland have been completely ignored in their quest to try to shut this industry down. And there are some 6,000 unconventional gas wells in southern Queensland. And about half of those have been drilled literally in the last 3.5 years. And the effects in southern Queensland are horrendous. Take a look at this.
About the gas company, you'd invite them back tomorrow for tea, wouldn't you?
As long as it's tea made out of their water.
Yep.
As long as they're the only ones that drink it.
It's true. Well, the creek from the evaporation pond that was built back here to the west of us, they decommissioned it and pushed the banks in. The salinity that was left in and water salinity and brine that was left in the bottom of the evaporation pond flowed out, came down into the creek. The little bits of water that from the rain, the 10-15 mils, brought the water down with the saline mixture in it and lay in the creek here, which trees on the other side that you can see are dead, they suck their water from the bed of the creek. Back here on the right, there's probably 150, 200 metres with very few trees in it. They all died and have been removed by the QGC. They rehabilitated, they put test holes down, had little flags marked all over there. There would have been probably 1,000 of them, different depths. They drilled down probably a 2-inch hole and did the soil test. They brought soil back in from probably one of their other, where the old soil went. The contaminated soil went to one place, and in their rehabilitation plan they had 3 sites that they were going to take it to, or could have taken it to, and they were going to bring soil back from one of those 3. Yeah, they brought back black wattle in the soil. The seed must have been in the soil because there's no black wattle anywhere along the creek, probably not within 3 or 4k of the creek. It will take over if let go.
And are they managing the black wattle?
No.
Would you like them to?
Yeah, well, you like them to do a lot of things, but that's only like, they don't do. About the gas company, you'd invite them back tomorrow for tea, wouldn't you?
As long as it's tea made out of their water.
Yep.
As long as they're the only ones that drink it.
It's true.
Well, it's no wonder that the people of Queensland are desperate to get better representation in their state government and, of course, at a national level. There are many concerns about what is occurring in Australia right now. Tony Abbott, the Prime Minister of Australia, has recently introduced the most oppressive surveillance legislation, all on the back, of course, of the threat of Islamic State terror. But it's a very far-reaching piece of legislation which effectively enables the state security services and the state police to surveil pretty much anybody that they consider to be a challenger to state orthodoxy. Well, call it maybe going into the lion's den, but I'm actually going to be going out to Australia in November to speak at a series of events, and you can see on screen here, this is the events for anybody who's watching from Australia. These events are being organised by an organisation called Freedom Summits, and their website is www.freedomsummits.org. And this is 4 events across Perth, Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane. They're weekend events. And apparently I'm speaking twice during these events. And the topic of my presentation, the title of the talks, is Apathy Kills, the Greatest Threat to Humanity Ever. Now, the organisers of these events are obviously kindly paying my airfare and my expenses while I'm out there. But I'm going to take the opportunity whilst I'm in Australia, and after the final conference in Brisbane, I'm going to take a trip out to the Gaslands and spend some time with my good friend Brian Monk and a number of other people who have experienced significant negative impact on their livelihoods and their lives as a direct result of the proximity of the unconventional gas industry. Now, I've already enlisted the support of Marco Jackson, the outstanding producer of The Truth Behind the Dash for Gas. But Marco has to earn a living, so he's not able to do this work for me pro bono. So I do need to put out an appeal for help with the final editing and production of the material that I bring back from Australia. And the purpose of this will be to put together a short video presentation showing the horrendous effects that this industry has had on the people of southern Queensland in literally a period of less than 5 years. And anybody who believes that it will be any different in the UK is, of course, living in a world of delusion. So if you can support the film, then please go to frackingnightmare.com. And you'll see a donation box on the left-hand side of the page there. And if you make any donations that are made between now and the end of November will be put into the production of the video that I shoot from my trip to southern Queensland. Now, in the Telegraph, in the mainstream media, this is literally from the Telegraph today. Farmers fear fracking could spell financial ruin. Well, that's, of course, been the case for many farmers in southern Queensland, and I'll be speaking with a number of them and looking at the direct impact of that. If we can bring that slide back. So it's the NFU. Now, the NFU only represents 18% of farming activity in this country now. The rest of the farming activity is effectively run by agribusiness. And the NFU wants assurances that farmers will be compensated if fracking reduces the value of their land, and accuses ministers of brushing aside their fears. Well, let's have a look at the opening paragraphs in this article. Farmers fear they could face financial ruin from government plans to allow fracking beneath their land and without compensation, the National Farmers Union has warned. Ministers pushing for shale gas exploration cannot take the support of rural communities for granted and are turning farmers against the process by appearing to brush aside their concerns. The government is pressing ahead with new laws that could strip people of power to block fracking beneath their property or land. It has insisted no compensation will be paid to individual home and landowners because they should not be affected by the gas or oil extraction deep beneath them. Should not. Well, that's exactly what the landowners and the agricultural communities were told in the US and, of course, in Australia, but the physical evidence would suggest that that is not the case. So the National Farmers Union, which represents 47,000 farm businesses across England and Wales, said its members feared that the value of their land above fracking sites could be reduced because of current attitudes and perceptions of fracking, even if no harm was actually caused. This could have serious consequences for farmers, especially those with mortgages to secure their land, for whom any reduction in the value of the land could have significant financial implications. The reality is actually far worse. It's not just a question of the fall in land values, it's the reality that there's going to be an increasing awareness that people will want to know where their food supply has come from. And as we have in East Yorkshire, where Birdseye have effectively got a contract on a number of the fields there, and customers, we know that many customers of Birdseye have written to Birdseye stating their concern that peas are being harvested from fields adjacent to well sites in East Yorkshire. So it's going to be a lot worse than just land values, and it doesn't matter where you go in the world, and even in the UK, just go to the Fylde Peninsula, and you will see that estate agents are going out of business at a phenomenal rate of knots, and property values are basically falling to zero. Basically, properties are unsaleable. Now, here's a picture that I've shown over the last few weeks. This is Horse Hill. Horse Hill in Surrey, South Surrey, just outside Hawley, just north of Gatwick Airport. And I've put up 2 Bambuza videos over the last few weeks, both shot at weekends, and both showing the fact that Horse Hill Developments, operating the site on behalf of Magellan, were able to do so without any concern, apparently, by the local community. And obviously, they were expecting a lot more interest, because one can see by the security fences that they built around their site. But things are changing, and the people of North Sussex, 12 miles north of Balcombe, are becoming aware of this well site. And on Sunday, yesterday, there was a picnic. And a number of people from Sussex and from Surrey gathered at the gates of the well site to express their concern. Unfortunately, apparently today, the site is once again empty. But nonetheless, hopefully this has served the purpose of raising awareness in the area. And I know that there is a local meeting taking place at Hawley on the 13th. So this is ostensibly Magellan contracting Horse Hill Developments to drill the site for them. Now, Horse Hill Developments is chaired by a guy called David Lenigas, who's an Australian extraction industry professional. And earlier this year, David Lenigas, who basically has consistently stated that they're not fracking at Horse Hill, and they have no intention of fracking. They're simply going for the conventional hydrocarbons there. But just listen to this short extract from David Lenigas's contribution in the plenary session of an industry conference earlier this year. Now, there's another speaker before David Lenigas kicks in. And the reason being is because I want you to observe the magnitude of cognitive dissonance that is displayed here. So take a look at this.
But I hear a whole lot of things about, you know, the new technology, the fact that seismic's so much better, and then people throw things about fracking, which I don't quite understand, but I know if The Guardian and my wife think it's a bad thing, then it's got to be a good thing. Has technology changed your industry? Has it de-risked it in any way?
Huge. Absolutely.
So it's de-risked it?
Yeah. We're not a 1 in 7. We've had 2 dry wells out of over 20. So it's not about the exploration risk. It's about the engineering risk and the cost of getting it out at this point. So we're not in the same ball game when you're dealing with horizontal drilling and fracking. On a horizontal well, a vertical well, you're going to drill down and you're going to hope to hit some natural fractures. On a horizontal well, you're going to hit a whole bunch of them. It's just a matter of how many you can interconnect and what the economics are on something like that. So I don't see the risk in that. The technology has changed things, and if we want to talk about fracking, and the UK is becoming, you know, front and center on fracking, it's fairly, I don't want to say it's the cleanest thing around, but if there were a problem, we probably would have shut it down in the US a while ago.
David, is fracking going to change, is it going to be opening up new energy boundaries for the UK, and is it totally safe?
Right.
And has it de-risked?
I'm going to
the
tell
process?
everybody a big secret. Every oil company and gas company in the world today fracks already. Sounds like the BBC here. And this is about the change in technology. In the old days, you drill a well, you hit some oil, you hit some gas, and you get a flow of, I don't know, 500 barrels a day. What the world does today is they pressurise that ground with acid, water, anyway, to open up the cracks around the well so it flows better. That's called fracking. They all do it. They do it here, they do it onshore, they do it offshore. All this concept of conventional oil and gas, absolutely. It is conventional, but they frack every well. What they're doing now, and this is how fracking came about in the state, they've been drilling horizontal wells for the last 30 years. And they frack them. What they've worked out on the unconventional gas plays is you drill longer horizontal wells and you can pressurise the ground even more and frack it even more. So what's fracking? They frack it already. Now, I read a report the other day, which hasn't been published, that Britain has, on a P50 basis, in 2 basins alone, on a P50 basis, 1,000 trillion cubic feet of unconventional gas. And that's going to be sort of coming out in the next couple of weeks. It's been in the papers. Of unconventional gas available for fracking. Where does Britain get its oil and gas from? Britain produces onshore 1% of Britain's oil consumption. Britain consumes 80 billion cubic feet a day of gas. Britain is 25% sufficient of its own gas. It all comes from Norway, Russia, and as we all know, reading the newspapers, sometimes we get down to half a day's gas supply. It's going to happen. It's already happening, and it's been happening here for 20 years.
Well, that's a clip from a video that's about 25 minutes or so that you can find on YouTube. Now, the first speaker there made the observation about hydraulic fracturing, and he said if there were problems, they would have probably shut it down in the US a long time ago. This is the kind of cognitive dissonance that those in the industry actually have to employ to be able to sleep at night. Because if they actually looked at the situation, then of course they might start to realize that actually there's a significant number of people that have experienced the negative effects of this industry. But now let's turn to David Lenigas's observations. And there's a few inaccuracies there. I mean, first of all, he makes the observation that we get gas in the UK from Russia, which we do not, which DEC have confirmed. In fact, in their own figures of 2013, it states quite clearly that the amount of gas that the UK gets from Russia may be 0.4%, and that's simply an estimate based on the fact that some of our gas may have originated from Russia through the Trans-European pipeline. He then repeats the media hype that there have been a number of occasions when the UK has been down to half a day's gas supply. This is a complete crock. This is spin put out by the industry that is pure fear-mongering. And, you know, companies like Centrica that have the responsibility for delivering gas, you know, they have good strategists, and they would never allow themselves to be in a situation where there's only half a day's gas supply. This is pure fear-mongering. It's fear porn to promote this industry's agenda. He also makes the observation that horizontal sections in wells are longer in unconventional geology. I mean, this is, I can only assume that he misspoke, because I cannot believe for one moment that David Lenigas would be under the illusion that horizontal wells drilled in unconventional geology are of significant lengths. They're not. You know, some of the longest reaches in the UK are the wells off Witch Farm, which reach under Poole Harbour and into the Solent. And indeed, these wells were drilled some 20 plus years ago, 25 years ago or so. In unconventional geology, it is rare for the well to exceed 2 kilometres, because by definition, it's tight geology, it's very compact, it's very difficult to get the drill bit through. Yet, David Lenigas seems to have a completely contradictory opinion. And of course, he also trots out the old myth. And here I got a screenshot of it here. He says, every oil company in the world fracks today. Fracking has been happening in the North Sea for 20 years without discerning that the stimulation process in conventional wells is very different from that of the unconventional geology. And in fact, when the Royal Society were contacted to get their comment on the fact that made the statement that some 2,000 wells have been drilled onshore in the UK over the last 30 years, and approximately 200, 10% of them, have been hydraulically fractured. And the Royal Society basically said, sorry, nothing to do with us, so we were simply repeating what DEC told us. Well, when DEC were contacted, they said, we do not have records of how many of these wells were fracked because until recently, fracking was regarded as a fairly routine oil field operation and not subject to specific consent. From inquiries to the operators, we believe that at least 200 did have hydraulic fracturing treatments of some kind. But here's the kicker. But we would emphasise that these non-shale fracks are not comparable in the volumes or the pressure of fluid employed, i.e., as with Quadrilla's operations at Priest Hall in 2011, which remains the only unconventional well fracked in the UK to date. So I just wanted to flag that up so that when David Lenigas says, well, we're not fracking at Horse Hill, I think that we shouldn't take that at face value and that we should conduct much deeper investigations. And thankfully, now that an increasing number of people are aware of Horse Hill and have visited the Horse Hill location, hopefully that means that there will be an increasing number of people digging through the Magellan and Horse Hill developments documentation and looking to establish exactly what it is they're doing. Of course, we know that Magellan have announced that they have decided to defer running the well logs in the unconventional sections of the well at Horse Hill, but they will still be taking core samples. So the bottom line is, to all intents and purposes, Horse Hill is an unconventional exploratory well by the back door. The other good news this week was that Port Talbot Council rejected UK Methane's application to drill a coalbed methane well in South Wales. So that was on the same day as the Northern Irish Assembly effectively rescinded Tamron's licence. So that was 2 out of 2 to the anti-fracking community. So what that left was Beverley and Rathlin Energy's application for a 2-year extension to operate on their well site at Crawberry Hill in East Yorkshire. We'll be talking to John and Val Marga and discussing how that went after this break.
"60% of the English countryside is under threat from fracking, a process which has transformed the landscape in many parts of the United States and Australia and contaminated the drinking water and air with highly toxic chemicals and gases.
1 in 3 hydraulic fracturing was using a carcinogen. So it really is a chemical cocktail that goes into the earth, of which up to 40% remains there.
The grandchildren were in the bath and they started screaming and everything that was in the water was burnt.
The MDs have been instructed not to report any negative health effects that they believe to be associated with living over a gas field.
There's nothing inherent about the shale gas process that is going to lead to problems.
Some of this material was actually taken to a large sewage treatment works, which had no capacity to handle radioactive materials of this kind.
800,000 gallons was dumped into the Manchester Ship Canal.
50 seismic events were recorded during just 6 fracking treatments.
What is the minimum depth that the fracking will fracture?
We can't tell you until we drill the exploration.
Have you no idea whatsoever? Because it doesn't look like you've done your research.
Shale gas is part of the future and we will make it happen.
We are just numbers, and we are sat on this rich vein of gas, and they will do and say anything to get that gas out of the ground.
And welcome back to part 2 of Fracking Nightmare. So where we left at part 1, we'd had 2 results out of 2, Northern Ireland and South Wales. So was it going to be 3 out of 3 with Rathlin Energy in East Yorkshire? Over the last couple of weeks, we've been speaking with John and Val Marga. And tonight, unfortunately, Val is not feeling too good, but we have John on the line. So John, welcome to Fracking Nightmare. And we'll round up the sequence of events here, of course, discussing what occurred in the council chambers in Beverley on Thursday, where you, in fact, were the nominated person to represent those who opposed Rathlin's planning extension. And, of course, you were up against this particular individual. Here we have David Montagu-Smith. There he is, David Montagu-Smith, and there's the rig at Crawberry Hill when it was drilling last year. So, John, give us your overview. Unfortunately, I was videoing, of course. I was live streaming in the chamber and videoing, but the acoustics in the chamber were atrocious and the sound system wasn't working very well. So, unfortunately, the video is really not usable at the moment. So, give me your overview of what occurred that afternoon.
I don't think I've ever seen a planning committee meeting where the members were so obviously nervous, maybe because they were being filmed, but certainly got the impression they weren't happy. Good turnout from the protection community, although only 40 of us were allowed in, with another 40 or so stood outside, including some very welcome visitors from Lancashire. Very limited debate. The normal thing at a planning committee is for each member to have the chance to speak, and they usually speak at some length. But I think you'll agree that their interventions were very short and limited. The meeting kicked off with the planning department reading out a further 17 objections that had been received since the report was printed. And of course, that was a very strong overview of all the typical objections that have come in. 348 objections in total, 1 letter of support. Obviously, what we tried to do was to give an overview of the very compelling reasons why, if they weren't going to kick the whole idea out, they should at least adopt the precautionary principle and make sure they had much more information than had been presented by the planning officers as to the implications. As one of the objection letters said, you don't do exploration on its own, you do exploration for a purpose. And in this case, we know that Rathlin has...
And it looks like, we really have a problem with Kingston Communications. And, down here in Devon, I can still remember the date that we got broadband. It was the 12th of August, 2004. And Devon was fast-tracked for broadband because it was deemed an area that was in need of economic support, and broadband would help kickstart small businesses in the area. Well, here we are 10 years later, and the city of Hull must rank as having one of the most unreliable broadband services in the country. So, unfortunately, John is not going to be with us just for the moment. But now, what John was saying there about, the members of the planning committee being very nervous, well, one of them was actually asleep. This is the female member of the planning committee, who I understand is also an MBE. But as one of the local news photographers was able to show by taking numerous photographs of her during the course of the hearing, then the only time she actually opened her eyes was because she was concerned that the noise from the public gallery was keeping her awake. She actually made the observation. She said the protesters do themselves no favours. Well, they weren't protesters in the public gallery, ma'am. They were local residents. The other concern that I have is that with two exceptions, every other member of the planning committee for East Riding Council looked as though they'd actually come off life support systems to attend the meeting that afternoon. You know, the average age had to have certainly been well into the late 70s. And of course, the reality is that the likelihood of any of those individuals still being on this mortal coil when the effects of this abomination hit is remote. But despite the fact that as John said there, 348 letters of objection, many of them extremely detailed, extremely articulate, clearly individuals and local councils, parish councils, who had made a very real effort to look deeply at this issue. And yet it was dismissed almost out of hand by those on the planning committee. With the resulting vote was that all bar one person voted in favour. Now, I think John's back with us.
Yes.
John, I was berating Kingston Communications there, making the observation that Hull Communications is almost third world by comparison to the rest of the country.
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway, you're back with us. I was just explaining while you were gone that the makeup of the planning committee was a cause for concern because with two exceptions, they looked like they'd all parked their Zimmer frames out the back. And I made the reference to the female member, I didn't mention her name, but the female member who spent the proceedings basically in the land of Nod.
Yeah, and because someone made an interjection from the public gallery, then woke up and criticised them for disturbing her. Not at all impressive, and I do think I certainly welcome the fact that all council business will now be filmed and subject to any form of recording that anybody wants to use. But I think some of those councillors will have to improve their public image.
Well, I mean, I must confess that I was absolutely appalled. I mean, it's the first time that I've sat in on a planning meeting, and I expected that something of this order of magnitude, with this level of public interest, would receive, at least the credence of significant debate. But there really wasn't very much debate at all, was there?
No, we know that they had been briefed by the planning department, and indeed Councillor Boatman, the single Labour councillor, gave the game away, really, where he made reference to the risk of a planning inspection, an appeal, which would go to an independent inspector if they didn't go along with the recommendation. What the councillors basically failed to address was that there was a special condition on Crawberry Hill because of its vulnerabilities, the importance of the aquifer and so on. And they only had planning permission for 2 years. And that is the condition that Rathlin is not able to meet. So what they were doing was giving permission to someone who said, yeah, it's a fair cop, I can't meet the planning condition, I want to break it, give me 2 more years. And the whole point is the landscape and the aquifer haven't changed over the 2 years since the same planning officers said it had to be a 2-year limit. And there they are saying, well, it doesn't really matter, you can have another 2 years if you want, go to 4 years. Now, the interesting thing, although they didn't admit it, is they've clearly been under pressure from their own supporters because the chair moved an amendment to say that Rathlin would only be permitted 1 year of operations and then 6 years to clear up the site.
6 months.
Sorry, 6 months, yeah. 6 months to clear up the site. And already Rathlin are making noises in the press about they're not sure they're going to be able to do it within 12 months and all the rest of it. But this is basically an incompetent cowboy operation. I mean, it described itself as wildcat, and it certainly isn't a wildcat operation. But they'll say anything that comes into their mind to persuade a particular audience. But they're out of their depth, it seems to me. I mean, tonight, we thought over the weekend they were dismantling their equipment at West Newton, but I've picked up information tonight that in fact they're putting stuff back in the ground there. So it's a very confusing situation. And by the way, they were supposed to be off the West Newton site with their equipment by October the 2nd, and it's now October the 6th. So again, these are people that, if anybody's interested, could certainly do with a project manager that knows what they're doing.
So we've got a situation now where Montagu-Smith, has obviously been at the helm of the campaign for the protection of Rathlin Energy for a while now, and he was seeking 2 years on the Crawberry Hill site. He effectively was given a year and then 6 months. But interestingly, one of the comments that he made during his presentation and subsequently to the media is that he is now calling upon East Riding Council to initiate eviction proceedings to get rid of the camp on the verge there. What's your reaction to that, John?
Well, it's ridiculous because, of course, in contrast to the eviction proceedings that we witnessed in London, Ian, where the judge made it clear that Rathlin, as a private landowner, wasn't subject to the Human Rights Act. East Riding of Yorkshire Council certainly is, and that camp is on public land. East Riding of Yorkshire Council has a duty under the human rights legislation to recognise right of assembly and right of free expression, and indeed to support it even if it causes difficulty and offence to passers-by and so on. And it's not causing difficulty and offence. It's still a very well supported camp. What's been fascinating, Ian, is on the 2 nights that Val and I have been up there, both on the day of the planning committee and the next day, the police turned up and started physically pushing people around within minutes of arriving, taking a very strong approach. Now, the impression I've got, they were more peaceable tonight, the police. The police and Rathlin seem to think they're onto a winner here. But East Riding Council would be very misguided if they didn't reflect on the high...
Oh, we've dropped again. And I think what John was about to refer to was the case histories of this industry effectively challenging the protection community. And at Balcombe, where Quadrilla had to get off of their site by September 28th last year, they applied to West Sussex County Council for planning permission to return. That was granted by West Sussex, despite the fact there was some nearly 900 letters of objection. And the local community raised the funds to initiate a judicial review. And that's the stage of that process right now. Of course, elsewhere, it didn't even get beyond the planning committees because in West Sussex, Celtic effectively had their applications rejected by West Sussex County Council and again by the South Downs National Parks Planning Committee. Now, in Barton Moss, it was a bit of a different situation because the camp was actually on private land. It was on the verge alongside Barton Moss Road, which of course ultimately was determined to be a footpath. Now, although the camp was on private land, and the judge in the initial hearing ruled that the camp should indeed be evicted and the land returned to Peel Holdings, the reality is that the appeal court actually upheld the request for an appeal hearing. The difference at Crawberry Hill, of course, was that the eviction was sought because the Crawberry Castle, which had been built by the protection community, was actually blocking the gate. John, I think you're back with us now.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I think I preempted what you're about to say there regarding the sort of previous legal situations at Balcombe and at Barton Moss. And of course, it is very different actually at Crawberry Hill because the camp is indeed on public land, and the camp is directly related to Rathlin. So the reality is that this isn't a long-term camp. The camp literally will be there for the duration of Rathlin's presence. So, I mean, obviously, Montagu-Smith is trying to apply the pressure. What do you think the reaction of the camp will be if eviction papers are served?
Well, I think it's very kind of Montagu-Smith and East Riding Council to consider giving more publicity. I think a court hearing would be fascinating. If you look at the objections, if you look at the detailed reasons why a High Court judge agreed with a judicial review at West Sussex, I think the information and the situation in East Riding is actually stronger than the case in West Sussex. But of course, I'm no legal expert, which is why I will be going to one of the solicitors who was involved in the successful proceedings in West Sussex to get her advice. I don't think it's wise for me to say more than that at this stage, but there is a very strong feeling that both a judicial review may be the way forward, but also that there are very clear grounds for opposing eviction from public land by protectors who are simply, along with large numbers of local residents, going about their lawful business in terms of their right to say what they think and their right to get together to say what they think.
I would absolutely concur with that. I think that even if a circuit judge in the northeast ruled in favour of East Riding Council, I think, based on precedents, that an appeal court judge would rule that there were indeed grounds for appeal. And as you rightly say, the reality is that in serving eviction papers, it would actually give the camp more publicity than it could ever possibly afford to buy.
Yeah, that's right. So we carry on. We need to remember, by the way, that the Planning Permission isn't passed until the full council meets this Wednesday, which is why Val and I spent time today writing to councillors, pointing out some of the information that was overlooked in the planning discussion.
So, okay, so the final decision on the planning extension is this Wednesday, and then after Wednesday, obviously Rathlin have to decide whether or not they're going to move equipment in straight away or wait for East Riding Council to serve papers, eviction papers, which the process could then take another 6 months or so, by which time Rathlin would be left with only 6 months, which is pretty much the same as they had this time, and the likelihood is that they just won't be able to do it. I mean, the bottom line is that Montagu-Smith is behind the 8 ball here. I'm sure he's going to age very quickly, just like Francis Egan would appear to have aged very quickly. I mean, these CEOs are clearly not able to achieve the objectives that they've told either their shareholders or their holding company management team that what they claim to be able to achieve. And all the time, of course, it's costing money. I mean, Rathlin have invested, what do they claim, something like 15 million up to date in East Riding?
Yeah, and I think there's a few quick points here, Ian. First of all of the difficulties that Rathlin encounter arise from the fact that they're trying to run 2 sites with 1 set of drilling equipment. That was the strategy they adopted. And it's sort of playground maths, isn't it? If they've got a drilling rig stuck at West Newton and the starting pistol is fired this week by a formal notice telling them they've got 12 months to finish on the site, and they haven't got ready to move their rig on the site, they're going to start running out of time. And of course, if they foolishly proceed with the eviction, if they carry on pressurising the council for eviction, as you pointed out, that will cut into the delay in getting the work finished. But the big picture is that all along, the operators group has said that apart from the technical difficulties presented by the geology in the UK, the government has still failed to get the vast majority of the public on side with the shale gas issue. And they can't go on forever saying that all these companies are only prospecting for conventional oil and gas. The fact that they're doing that proves that they have not as yet convinced the wider public, or the public in particular areas like the East Riding, that what they're proposing to do is a good idea. It's a ridiculous idea in a world where we need to reduce carbon emissions, not increase them.
Now, John, from speaking to people outside of the hearing, I mean, I think there was actually a lot of concern, because I think you would agree that the generic demographic of East Riding is largely conservative, with both a small and a large C. And I think right up until the moment that the council held the vote, which was 11-1 in favour of Rathlin, I actually think that a lot of the people there actually believed in due process. And they actually believed that their elected representatives would recognise the strength of their respective electorates and vote against the application. So I sense that there was absolute shock, horror, disbelief, and yet, at the same time, a massive increase in resolve amongst the local community.
Exactly. And, you know, every time we go out now, and last week was a good example, to be standing outside County Hall and to see faces that I have never seen before. This is by no means the usual suspects, and people coming up saying, what are we going to do next? What can we do about this? How disgraceful it all is. How disgraceful the process of passing that through. How disgraceful that people can't even get into the council chamber. And, you know, I know the demographic, we've discussed it before. A lot of these would normally be Conservative voters, and the media coverage, very favourable. The core issues are now in the newspapers, a very long news programme that evening, concluding with a prominent local person shouting from the balcony, "You've made a terrible mistake, you're going to regret this, you should be ashamed of yourself." This is very damning publicity, and the current, I would call it almost an elected dictatorship of the Conservative Party in the East Riding. What with UKIP and with the Green Party starting to gird up for a fight and so on, and the Labour Party locally against the national position, taking a strong position against fracking and against industrialisation. I think the next local elections will be very interesting indeed.
Well, John, I know it may sound perverse, but in the scheme of things, I think that this council decision is actually going to serve the anti-fracking community very, very well indeed. I mean, I think what it's done is it's as we said, it's increased the resolve of the local community. The local community are showing their support for the camp. The camp is growing. The camp is looking, very professional now. It's getting ready for the winter. It's being winterized. Safety features have been built so that families can come there and not have a problem with children or dogs running into the road. And I sense that as the magnitude of this decision sinks in, Rathlin and the wider industry and the government and industry investors are going to begin to appreciate the magnitude of the opposition. To claim that they have social license is just totally delusional.
Yes, I mean, the fact that we're getting the numbers in an area like the East Riding is very telling. I'm very interested.
Well, we've lost John again. Let's see if we can get him back in the last few minutes. Meanwhile, I have effectively spent the bulk of my time in East Yorkshire over the last 5 months. But I have to take my leave from East Yorkshire, and I leave it, I think, in very good hands. The community there The anti-fracking community is growing exponentially. Local groups are springing up in all the villages. There's a number of other talks being arranged, and hopefully the number of groups in the various East Riding communities will continue to grow. I'm going to be heading a few miles north. I'm going to be heading up to North Yorkshire. And if we just look at this map here, here we see Scarborough over on the right-hand side of the page here. And running right across here is basically the Vale of Pickering. And as you can see, it is effectively all licensed. Now, a couple of wells were drilled last year, just as they were in the East Riding, whilst everyone's attention was focused on Borkham. But now there is an attempt by Third Energy, which is primarily owned by Barclays Bank. There's an attempt by Third Energy to get permission to drill a well at Eberston Moor. And if that wasn't a problem enough, then associated with that is an attempt to get permission to drill a well for re-injection. In other words, to re-inject the toxic waste into the geology. And this is potentially a pathfinder for an industry that is looking to ride on the back of the unconventional gas industry. Because the government released a white paper at the end of July, which is focused on deep geological disposal, using the wells, the deep wells drilled by the unconventional gas industry for the disposal of toxic waste. And this is an issue that has already caused enormous problems in Oklahoma. So once again, this is not a novel industry. This is something that has a track record, and that track record is not very pretty. So John, I think you're back with us. We're just in the process of bringing the show to a close. John, are you back with us?
I am.
You are, fantastic. Sorry, I was just saying that I've spent a wonderful 5 months working with yourself and the other wonderful people of both Hay Frackoff, Hull and East Yorks Frackoff, and all the community groups that have arisen over the last few months. And now I'll be taking my leave for a few weeks as I head up to North Yorkshire and then, of course, over to Australia. So, John, I mean, thank you and Val. I mean, you guys were the first to literally put yourselves between the trucks and the well site with your arrests in May. The good news being, of course, that all charges have been dropped. But, you have been an absolute inspiration to the community in East Yorkshire. And I obviously will be still following events in East Yorkshire very closely. And if the trucks start rolling, well, who knows? I may well be commuting down from North Yorkshire over the next couple of weeks.
Well, and I think everybody here would thank you for your inspirational meetings that have been part of drumming up support and spreading awareness of the nightmare that is fracking, Ian. And I don't think we would have achieved what we have achieved without your advice and support. So thank you. And we will be following you closely because, as you know, Val has family connections in North Yorkshire. Well,
John, I mean, as we both know, I mean, this is a team effort, and that team is growing exponentially. And it is an absolute pleasure to work with people from literally right across the social and the political spectrum. And whatever other differences we have, we all put aside, and we focus on the one thing that we are absolutely united on, and that is that this abomination has no place in the UK.
Yep, absolutely.
So, John, thanks very much. I will see you. I will be back briefly just to pick up my mobile home, my petit bijou residence, to tow it 40 miles north, so that I'm based up in North Yorkshire for the next few weeks. So here's the poster for the tour. Is fracking safe? Hopefully we'll be reaching out to people who are still undecided, and maybe even those who think it's a good idea. And as the North Yorkshire community is very much agricultural and tourist related, we will certainly be addressing those issues. So here's the schedule. I start the tour in Helmsley this coming Wednesday, then Kirby Misperton on Thursday, Kirby Moorside on Friday, and then I'm in York during the day for Global Frackdown and also for an event at the Priory Street Centre in the evening. Now, I'm not sure that there's going to be an episode of either Humanity vs Insanity or Fracking Nightmare next week because of the commitments I have in North Yorkshire, but I will definitely be back in 2 weeks' time. And then, of course, I'll be back for one more week before I head out to Australia. And once again, if you feel you can support the post-production work that's going to be necessary to put the footage together so that we can get it out there, get it into the public domain, so that we can show people the effects that this industry has had in southern Queensland, where the communities have been subjected to this abomination for less than 5 years. We can stop this. We will stop this. The investors need to pull out, and the politicians need to know that if they support this agenda, they will not get elected. And David Cameron needs to know that if you pull the plug on the Human Rights Act, then who knows what can happen. So thank you for joining us tonight, and see you in 2 weeks' time.